Hello, everyone, and welcome to Life After the Military, a show completely focused on reversing the trend of veteran suicide, homelessness, and problematic transitions by helping veterans transition from military to civilian life and strengthening the mental fitness of our active duty military members, veterans, and their families. Our show is powered by Pivotal Moments Media, an organization on a mission to strengthen mental fitness worldwide for all. Go check them out at pivotalmomentsmedia.com to learn more. My name is Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Howie Cohen, and we are privileged to have Brigadier General retired Mike Eastman with us today. General Eastman, a 1991 distinguished graduate of West Point, served as a field artillery officer in multiple command and staff assignments for 20 years. These assignments included battalion and brigade command, deputy director for operations and director for future force design, development and integration on the joint staff, Deputy Commanding General of the 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, New York, and Commanding General, Train, Advise, Assist Command South in Afghanistan. After retiring from the Army, General Eastman took a position as Managing Partner at Eastman Strategic Partners and assumed his current role as the Executive Director of the Army ETS Sponsorship Program. Mike, it's a pleasure to have you today. Welcome to Life After the Military.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. It's great to be here.
No, as always, it's an honor. And we start every show with a similar question. We said that you were in the Army for over 20 years. Can you share with our audience how you prepared and executed your transition out of the military into the private sector? What went well? What didn't go well? What would you do differently if you knew then what you know now?
What would I have done differently? I spent way too much time. I went, as probably all of us, I went straight into panic mode. I got to get a premium account on LinkedIn. I got to jazz up my resume. I got to reach out to everyone who ever knew me. And about 2 months into that sort of hectic process, I realized that was going nowhere fast and it was unnecessary. I needed to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I needed to clarify what value added, if any, I could be in that space, and then hone in on those opportunities that were there. I didn't do that at first. I was like a total shotgun. I was blasting every which way, not hitting anything. And it took a little bit of time and a little bit of patience, a little bit of good counseling from folks that had gone through it to help me end up where I am now, which is a really great opportunity here with this program.
I just love the fact that you mentioned that, and I think it's really important that senior leaders do understand what transitioning service members are going through. So, Mike, what I'd like to shift to is, and I'm hoping to have some, and I know we will have some good and deep conversation about this, is I'd like to talk about your role now as the Executive Director of the Army ETS Sponsorship Program. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, and I don't know if it's necessarily a term across all the military, I know it's definitely in the Army, but it's an expiration of term of service. It's essentially when you exit the military. So there is a program now, the Army ETS Sponsorship Program, that Mike is the Executive Director for. And what I would love for you to do is just talk about it, what it's designed to do, what its current state is, where you envision it going, and the kind of services and assistance you see it providing in the near and the long-term future.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. I will just reflect on one thing you said, Howie. My observation is a lot of transition, particularly for when you're talking about a senior leader looking at what a junior service member is going through. It's almost like you've got folks that have never transitioned themselves. It's like you're watching football, but you haven't played, but you've watched your favorite team for 30 years and you think you've got it down. You're making great calls. Man, they should have done a pitch left. But until you've done it, it's very hard. And and then there's this gap, right, where this is a major life change. You're a young soldier. Let's put it in civilian terms. You are facing potential homelessness, absolute relocation. You're facing potential unemployment, loss of medical coverage, loss of life insurance, and you probably have a family. I don't care how many times you've watched the game. Until you've done that, you don't understand it. And that's where our program, ETS Sponsorship Program, is trying to step in and fill a gap. It's not because there's a lack of good intentions on anybody's part. There's a lack of understanding. you have to live it, I think, in order to be value added to the folks that need the most help. So I'll just start with this. We started 6 years ago out of New York City with a nonprofit called Provetis. And it was a very simple idea. We were losing too many service members to suicide in the first 12 months after they got out. And our supposition was, it was because they were not adequately prepared for transition. There were too many converging pressures on them. Everything I just listed added to that, that for many of them, they joined the military straight out of high school. The population we serve as a program is generally 27, 26 years old. I take anyone, but 80% of them are 27 or younger. They have a partial college degree. They've never actually had to live as civilian adults. They were military adults, but that's a different thing. And you hear in the news all the time, 22 a day, 21 a day, what have you. This particular demographic, we're losing today at 45 a day. Wow. It is just unacceptable. And so we had a simple idea, right? What if you take a model they're used to, right? When they move from post to post, regardless of service, they have a sponsor. They got someone that can meet them on the other side and answer questions. Put that in civilian world. You got a much bigger move coming. You're not going from Fort Bragg to Fort Hood. You're going from Fort Drum to destination unknown. Give them a sponsor to walk the journey with them. And we've tested that simple idea for 5-6 years now with the good work of Joe Geraci and some folks in the VA, any number of researchers. And we've been able to prove that simple act of establishing a human connection, letting them know that somebody cares, they got somebody to talk to, reduces negative outcomes, reduces homelessness, reduces suicide, increases connectedness to the community in a way that I think is life-changing for the vast majority of folks that we touch.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about how the program helps connect that transitioning service member to potentially the communities that he or she is going to move to. It would be, I think it would be helpful to give folks the full context and understanding of how that works.
Sure. So we are in a public-private partnership with the VA. We start with that. And I joined the program with the aspiration of taking what was a local pilot in New York City and expanding it across the country with a lot of help from a lot of great people. And our charge from the VA when we first started was, we would love for you to expand to the point where you could handle 200,000 people a year in 5 years. So that's our mark on the wall. We sit today, we have 22 physical community locations across the country, both coasts. So we've gone from 1 to 22. We're in 11 states right now with 3 more coming. And then we also have a national pool for areas where we don't have a physical community sponsor yet. So we're managing young folks, older folks, going to every state in the union, territories, matching them up with sponsors across the country. And the goal is to have physical affiliates, trusted partners in every community in the not too distant future. We're getting there very quickly. This for me gets complicated very quickly, right? So if I were to break it down, in the simplest terms, we start with, we want to get to know you and enroll you a year before you leave the military. And we want to capture everything you want, everything you need in life, whatever you're comfortable telling me, as little or as much as that is. And then we want to match you with a sponsor from the place you think you're going. And we want to give that relationship time to build so that you have then someone on the other side that knows you and can walk you through that dangerous 12-month gap. Now, as we've built that out, we've started to look at, that's almost triage in a way. And what we really want to do is, how do we build these skills into folks while they're still on active duty? So that when they hit the 12-month window, that's not the first time Mike Eastman says, hey, do you have a resume? Have you thought about a network? Can you manage your finances? Or more importantly, have you taken advantage of the credentialing opportunities and the tuition assistance and all the things you're going to need? Because I know I loved walking around the division. Every private I talked to was going to be the next sergeant major of the Army, and every lieutenant was going to be the chief of staff. I hate to break it to them, but that's not normally how the story ends. And there's this sense of guilt, like I shouldn't be preparing myself for anything other than shooting my rifle. it would just totally out of place. You're a better soldier if you're preparing to be a better veteran. A soldier that can manage their finances and that has a resume and is thinking about opportunities and is building their education is a great soldier, and simultaneously preparing themselves and their families for success in the future. So we've started piloting further upstream. And we're working with units. Specifically, we have a great pilot going on with Fort Hood, where 3 Corps has really directed folks to get involved in the program. They can opt out if they want. They don't have to get a sponsor if they don't want. But if nothing else, make them aware of the program, get them enrolled so that we have a connection to them. In the special ops community, one of the things that you're involved with, Howie, we're tailoring a program for them because it's a different population. They're a little bit older. They've probably seen a little bit more activity downrange. They have a different set of needs. They have probably a higher level of privacy concerns. But we're getting them enrolled in a program that makes sense for them. They are looking for sponsors that they can relate to. So we're going to do that pilot slightly differently. We have a similar effort going up now at JBLM in Washington State. Little points of light, and over time, we'll bring all these things together in a way that makes sense. And the Army's been a great partner. We'll get Soldier for Life to the point where, you know, in my world, you're enrolling as a member of Soldier for Life when you hit AIT. And Soldier for Life is taking an active interest in your development over time. And I'm ready to catch you when you hit the transition window and help you the rest of the way through.
Yeah, and what I'm seeing now too, now that I'm pretty decisively engaged with the program, is how many organizations are starting to develop their own unit transition coordinator. Like we had either a company, a battalion, a brigade, even a division re-enlistment NCO or officer. I see now starting to pop up, at least in the units I'm getting exposed to right now, is a unit transition coordinator who, with the support of that organization's chain of command, which again is a really positive thing for me to see, is they're allocating resources, time, money, and effort, and people to put together their own internal unit transition course that will even look to identify folks at the 24-month mark and then start helping them to start thinking about, to start developing their plan, to be a little bit more ahead of the curve, and so they can stay ahead of the stress. But the beautiful thing is, if with these organizations doing that level of effort, bringing the power of the technology and the capability of the ETS sponsorship program to partner with those units, which is what we're piloting right now in 3 brigade-sized units in the U.S. Army Special Operations Command, is really fascinating to see. And you're absolutely right, Mike. One of the things in a very short time we've identified, and I think this is going to be true in other units as well, is when you can start bringing alumni of those units in who have transitioned and can share their stories and their challenges, but they're hearing it from folks who have already walked in their shoes. It just carries so much more power and credibility. It's a meaningful thing to be a part of. But I think the most important thing is you look at the overall goal, and that's to save lives. That's really what you're doing here, is you're saving lives.
Fantastic stuff, obviously, so far. A few things. You talked about the 22 to 45 a day. Well, that's 10,000 people plus a year. And I love that you use the word, it's unacceptable, because that means something too. You know what I mean? And if we were more aware of this as a country, not just obviously the military, if I said, yeah, you have 10,000 veterans die a year, it would be unacceptable to the society too. But for some reason, there's a stigma around this. We ignore it largely. Obviously, you're not, Howie's not. We're not trying to do that with the show. But I just wanted to say that for some impact for those listening. That would be unacceptable on any field of battle, any scenario, 10,000 people a year. It's any of that, half of that, a quarter of that. None of it's acceptable. So I just wanted to say that. Also, I love that your goal is exactly the amount of people transitioning a year. That's fantastic. There's more than sports analogies here with this. And again, I'm a sports guy. athletes experience this same type of loss when they retire from sports. In fact, you experience it after a season. We always talk about the postseason blues in sports. When a season ends, you've been part of this team for probably a majority of the year, suddenly that's gone. And it's very common, win or lose, to go into a depression. Now, it's usually pretty short because the season starts up not too long after that. But this is something that anybody in a transitional position feels, right? And you said it right. Civilians go through this quite a few times, probably by the time they're 30, just with jobs. Athletes go through it every year. And if you get traded, if you're a professional athlete, it could be multiple times a year. In a lot of ways, you experience it more. I can tell you right now from my own experience, when I retired from playing, it took me at least 5 years to be comfortable again. And I was involved in the sport still, but it took me 5 years to be able to even steady my mind of, okay, what's coming at the end of the season? You got to be mentally prepared, be mentally fit. There's no preparation. And then on top of this, like the NFL is a great example recently that they've been taking care of their veteran players with massive medical issues. A lot of players are like, hey, we're not cattle here. We're people. So this transitional situation, I'll say, obviously not limited to sports or the military, people go through this. With that said, on a positive note, there are people like you, there are people like Howie, there's lots of people trying to curtail this and change this. And I think we are starting to go the right direction, though I'm sure you'd both agree it is just a starting point. We're not near where we need to be with this. But I wanted to bring that up because, again, there's a human element here of transition. You know, Howie, you made this great suggestion, I think a week or two ago. We need to start preparing for transition almost the day you sign up. And I can understand it. A year out is just not, I don't want to say it's not enough time. It's just, I can see how stressful that would be. Suddenly your whole life's falling apart within a year. That's not enough time. It takes 9 months to make a human being. I don't know why we think a year is going to be enough time. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that. That I'm going to ask this question now from a civilian point of view, because I have never served in that way. Would helping new members of the military or starting a process from day one affect their military service negatively?
That's a really great question, Lee. And your point about the NFL is too. And I will just state really quickly, we've talked to the NFL.
That's awesome.
There's a lot of interest there for obvious reasons, because the parallels are very, very similar. And the word commodity does come up. It comes up in my world and comes up in their world. Should it impact someone's military career to be seen as preparing for things other than purely military tasks? Absolutely not. But this, I will bundle this in the same sort of basket as, should someone that's asking for mental health help be concerned about an impact on their military career? Now, Mike Eastman says, absolutely not. I want you to be the best you can be. And if you got issues, you need to get them resolved. But by and large, there's a stigma attached to it. Right. By and large, when I tell someone, I've told every lieutenant that's ever worked for me, if you don't have an updated resume, you are being an idiot, because you just don't know, right? You could break your back on a jump tomorrow and that's it, game over, man. And that's not the day to start a resume. But the general consensus I get is, but I don't want to be seen as disloyal. I'm totally focused. And I'm like, partner, you're focused on the wrong thing. I've written a couple communications to the senior leadership of the various services. And I've asked them, we really need to, all of us collectively as flag officers, need to be communicating that military service is not a destination. It is one step on a journey, and you will do it honorably and you will make great contributions to the country. But we have to approach it as one of the things you're doing in your life as a citizen of this great country. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And so I won't say that there's necessarily a stigma associated overtly with people being concerned about what they're going to do after the military, but it manifests itself in different ways. We can talk a great game, but then there'll be an opportunity. There'll be great programs out there. You can go to SkillBridge for 6 months and get some great experience and work in a company. But if you look at the percentages of folks that are actually allowed to do that, we've powered down that decision to an 0.5. Okay. But the 0.5 is accountable for how many people he can bring to the range and for how many vehicles he can maintain at 100%. He is not accountable for how many people are successful after the military. So the incentive structure is just completely wrong. We will continue to press. If you really believe that people should be focused on more than their military service, they should be focused on their life for great reasons, then the actions have to match the words. We have a crisis, it was in the paper 2 days ago. We have a crisis of recruiting in this country. And pretty well established fact that probably 70% of the folks coming into the military have pre-existing military ties right now, which means that the vast majority we're missing are folks with no military background. I've asked the question, right? If we have a suicide problem in our veteran population, if we have a homelessness problem or an unemployment problem or an underemployment problem, for all of this great country that doesn't live next to a military base, who do you think our potential next generation of service members is looking at when they're considering military service? You better hope it's not the dude on the street corner with a cardboard saying, "Give me $1, I'm a veteran." They need to be looking at people that have succeeded and they can aspire to be like them. And that takes time and commitment upstream from the day they put the uniform on. That's just my view.
That's a fantastic answer.
And now I believe that in everything you do, and I don't care whether you're a young kid playing youth ice hockey or you're a lieutenant or you're a sergeant major, whatever you choose to do, you do the best of your capability, and you always give your absolute best effort in everything you do. Even though it's a job, you're still going to give your absolute best effort and make yourself the best that you could be so that you can help others be the best they could be. But the fact of the matter is, it's a job. And my whole point here is, I think the ones who really are challenged, and we see many of them, are the ones who their sole identity is predicated on their time in uniform. And the ones who I think manage to get through the challenge of a transition, and it is challenging, and I don't want to say you will do it and do it successfully. You properly plan, prepare, and execute. But if you don't see your sole identity attached to your time in uniform, my guess is you're going to be reasonably successful over a point in time. We saw it with Brad Thomas, right? We interviewed Brad about a week or two ago. And what fascinated me was that here's Brad, who loved music as a kid growing up, wanted to be a professional musician. It didn't work out. And so when he graduated high school, chose to go into the military and challenged himself, went right to the Ranger Regiment, served there for a number of years, and then went to be a Delta operator for the remainder of his career. So this guy wanted to be a musician and still loved music all his career, but put himself in some of the most challenging situations, got 5 bronze medals, one with a V device for valor. So this guy really challenged himself, but the whole time he did it, and I love that he still maintained his identity of being outside the uniform, and always cherished that. And then when he decided, okay, I'm getting out, he was able to quickly transition to something else. And I love the fact, Mike, that the Soldier for Life program is considering now, and I really need to understand this better and figure out how I can help. But the fact that now we are going to start training young men and women when they first come in, because if you think about it, teaching them how to manage their finances, teaching them how to understand their sense of purpose and what really makes them tick. Teaching them, we put so much emphasis, and Lee and I have talked about this ad infinitum, we put so much emphasis on maintaining a certain level of physical fitness. You have to take a PT test, a physical fitness test, and meet a minimum standard to even stay in the military. Think about what if we were now teaching them and helping them maintain a certain minimum standard of mental fitness. So now when they face these stressors, when they face these adversities, whether it's in combat or not, and like you said, most of them are going to face them outside of combat. But if we're now teaching them and training them and giving them the tool set to now manage these stresses, because their mental fitness muscle is growing and growing, just like their physical fitness muscle is growing and growing, or at least maintain that standard. Think of how, first of all, how much more productive will they be in their job in the military? But more importantly, we are now preparing them for that transition out of the military and to be able to face and overcome that adversity. That I really need to understand and get more involved as well. Not that I don't have anything else to do. But I think it's fascinating because I do believe that's being proactive instead of reactive. And I'll even take it one step further. What if we are now have systems like that, processes like that in the education system in schools, where now we are now teaching and training and developing mental fitness and other kinds of resiliency and grit and the ability to overcome adversity in school children. And think of how now that population that we have to recruit from is going to be a healthier, maybe more robust population that'll even, when they come in the Army, they're armed with some of these tools and capabilities. What would that look like? So, Mike, what I'd love for you to also describe is, and I do appreciate what you said about veteran service organizations, because that's a pretty important part of the ETS sponsorship program. So maybe you could talk about that concept of how to align with the right kinds of VSOs, and talk, if you wouldn't mind, the veteran services that exist in the different communities around the country, because I think that are outside just the veteran service organization population. But I'm finding out now, and you already know this, there are states that have their own veteran service or veteran service departments that I think the program wants to align themselves to, right?
Yeah. Okay, a couple things there. First, the sponsors, that's important, and I'd love everyone that's listened today to sign up as a sponsor with your 18 closest friends, because we need as many as we can get. But we're not looking for the sponsors to be clinicians or social workers. It's not fair to them, and it's not really what we need anyway. Because as you said, there are plenty of services out there that folks can go to. But the question is, do you know how to get to them? And that's what the sponsor does. So our sponsors, they're a good mix, about 70% veteran, 30% civilian, all ages. My youngest signed up was, I think, 16. Had to break it.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
The oldest was 81.
That's awesome too.
But it's great, right?
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Everything in between. And when we bring them in for sponsor training, it's really, how do you talk to a veteran? How do you understand what they're going through? And then we have a block in there on how do you recognize the signs that someone is struggling? That's really it. And then we want to empower them with, if you see any of these challenges, here's who you call. Go to the professionals that do this. Now, when we look at community partners, part of our organizational mission is to reduce the clutter on the battlefield. So when we go into a community, you have to demonstrate to us a couple of things before we're going to talk to you. Do you have an established referral network? If someone comes to you in trouble, can you connect them to emergency housing or to medical care or XYZ? If you can't do that, if you're an organization that sponsors a 5K run once a month and raises money, I love what you do, but we're not part of that. So you be you, and we'll be us. Then we'll vet them. We'll look at it's unfortunate, but I'm looking at what's your overhead margin, right? What are you doing with the money you're bringing in? If they meet those thresholds, right? They're trusted, they're established, they have a functioning network, and they're doing the right thing for folks in a reasonable way. Then we will take them through a training. These are our expectations. This is our program. This is how we interact with you. At the end of the day, the ETS sponsorship program will not be a service provider. That is not my mission. My mission is to empower good people that are already doing this across the country with the things they need to do to know to do it better, right? Today, as we sit here, communities generally don't know when a veteran has arrived in their area. They have no clue.
No.
They meet them, and I tell folks this, and I get pushback on it all the time, but I believe it in my heart. If you're a new veteran, your community will generally meet you at a moment of crisis. That's when they'll know you're there. And it'll be either the emergency room or the unemployment line. That's where most new veterans make contact with their community. And we're just trying to break that stuff. If I can tell you 12 months out that Sergeant Mike Eastman and his family are showing up in Tacoma, Washington, on this date, and these are the things that they're going to need when they get there, you are taking all of that off the table, and you're going from reactive to proactive. Because honestly, despite the fact that there's so many VSOs out there, and not all of them are great, some are really good, some are less good, but every state has a Department of Veteran Services. Almost every county has a county veteran service officer. I don't want to compete with the federal, state, and local government to support veterans. So everywhere we can, we're partnering with these entities because that's their mission. They just don't know how to do it in most cases because they're not armed with who they're trying to help. Everything comes back to, we put all this in the new veterans rucksack, right? The one Muldoon you got that's never been to Ranger School is leading the patrol every time. And he's out there walking through the woods, and there's people behind him that know where he should be going, and they know how to read a map, and they know how to read a compass, but they're bound to determine, let this guy do it on his own. And we just have to invert that, because these things exist, and they're great people doing it. We just got to connect them, and that's where I think we come in. And the sponsor is an integral part of that. Sponsor lives in that community. If I can tell a sponsor that in 4 months you're going to need, you got these people coming in, they're looking to rent a home, but they need some help. They need access to their VA loan or what have you. There's time to handle that. Look, I served 30 years. I couldn't tell you where my county veteran service officer is. I couldn't tell you. I would have to call somebody and ask. And I'm a general, right? So if I'm a sergeant and I served 5 years and I'm in a town I've never been in, how can we reasonably expect to have that person navigate transition on their own? I just don't think you can.
One thing I want to bring up, Mike, this is all gold that you're giving us. We talked about the team aspect of this and how important that is. And the team just doesn't appear when you're gone. It goes away. And I always like to bring this to a societal level. We as humans are not meant to operate as individuals by ourselves. Now, this is extroverts and introverts, right? We need a tribe of some sort to function. And recently, we've seen what happens when people get extremely secluded and on their own. It never, ever ends. And I think about something you said earlier in the episode. You might join military, teenager. Suddenly you're on the greatest team on the planet. 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. Then you're not. There's no way to cope with that. I mean, easily, I should say. The support group is so important. I wrote on here that team equals life. Something you mentioned before we talked, I didn't want to forget to give you the opportunity to talk about this. And I'll equate in sports terms for you. I talked earlier about the end of the season blues, right? Everybody looks at the players on the ice or the field. Who else feels that? The coaching staff, the extended staff, the training staff, the family outside of the people actually playing the sport. I know something you're really passionate about is that it's not just the service member that it's going through the transition. It's the family. I have first world experience with that. All right. I was shocked after 10 years of service how uncomfortable I was. And if you can't tell, I'm a pretty outgoing, confident person. And I had major problems. I shouldn't say major. I had issues just transitioning from my wife's service. It took me at least a year to get somewhat comfortable, which was shocking to me. I've had conversations with Howie about this. I was coming from overseas. There's reverse culture shock. Your family members and your friends don't fully understand what you've just been through. They're supportive, but they don't fully understand what you've just been through. And then with my wife, who's going through it 100 times worse than I am because she actually served, and I'm having to be a rock for her. We've got 2 young kids. They're screaming baby. I'm thinking about it right now. I'm changing diapers. A lot was going on. A lot to say that. the question was, obviously, this is not limited to just servicemen and women. Families are going through this too, and that's part of the things that you want to target, correct?
Yeah, I think families are a lot of times a silent partner in this, and they don't get the support that they need. So I moved in the military. I moved 23 times over 30 years.
Wow.
And that resulted in my oldest going to 4 different high schools in 4 years. We got to a point where it was so hard on them, and I'm serving still, that I just parked them in one place here in Virginia, and I went by myself. I was a geographical bachelor for brigade commit for multiple assignments, and I would come back, and then I would go, and I would come back. And there are impacts on your relationship with your spouse when you do that. There are impacts with how do I as a father feel about being an absentee raiser of my children? These things add up. I think when you hit the transition space, and my wife, I think if she were here, would double down on what I'm about to say, all the pressure you feel as a service member becoming a veteran, you have a tendency, I think, absent a support network, to dump that towards your spouse. And they understand, so they're having their own thing. We live in a totally civilian neighborhood, and my wife has asked me a couple of times, when are we hosting the next thing? And I'm like, I don't even know these people. We're not hosting anything. Those days are gone. No one's lining up to come visit my house anymore. That sort of close-knitness, that instant connection you have with people, totally gone. They have no idea what I've done. They have and nor do they care, and rightfully so. It is what it is. But I think there are pressures there, and I think we have to do a better job. In many cases, right, the service member is the provider for the family, so they are worried about getting a job. And in many other cases, the spouse has deferred, as in my case, has deferred their career. Right. And it's an entertaining conversation you have. I'll just share with you Mike Eastman's family conversation. Okay, Mike, your time for playing soldier is over, and now it's my turn. And totally out of left field for me, because I'm thinking, okay, I got to get a cool job. I got to get a corporate job. I got to keep the standard of living up. My wife's like, yeah, noted. Right. Now it's my turn. And you're doing all that by yourself. You're doing that in the confines of your dining room, particularly with COVID. So I think we just have to do a better. We're trying. We've branched out. We got a partnership with UT that has a veteran network, spouse network. We'll make these connections. We're doing our best to capture the family needs as part of a service member enrolling in our program so that we don't discount those. I would just say this, the long and short of it is, no one unless you're single, and even when you're single, you have a family somewhere, no one transitions alone. And if we don't acknowledge that fact, it can, in certain cases, turn your spouse, the closest people in you, if you're struggling, they are a de facto mental health provider, and they are not equipped to do that. And it is unfair. And so we shouldn't overlook the fact that they need as much support as a service member themselves.
And I'm just going to support you with that too. You talked about your spouse. I just want everybody to think, wherever you're at in your life, wife, husband, partner, kids, these are not just impactful, Mike. These are tectonic level changes. And they are mad. I can't downplay enough that when your family really starts to get affected, you want to talk about stress. Like that is probably, in my opinion, the ultimate stress. And again, we were fortunate. Our kids were very young when we served, and really being born really towards the end of the service. But I lived with people who had kids in high school and watched them high school, and the effect that has, and you feel it as the parents. And then, as you said, I was on the other side of the dining room table that you just described, was like, no, now I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do what I want to do. And my wife, again, who's a physician, was like, I can't stop. And then, as you said, COVID. So now I'm on the sidelines again because I really have to be at that point. And God bless all our physicians and medical workers, obviously, for the last few years and beyond. But if you're not prepared to have those conversations, it can, as you said, come out of left field. And it really doesn't need to. These are conversations you should be having well before transition of, listen, when you get out, let's talk about your family. What does your spouse want? What does your partner want? Where are your kids at in their lives? And I think it's incredibly brave that you stationed them in one place and went on to do your job. I cannot imagine how hard of a ordeal that was on multiple levels. I think that speaks a lot about you as a father, husband, and in general. I mean, it's selfless service, right, to your own family. But these are some of the tough decisions that, again, for the civilian world, our servicemen and women have to make. Again, best team on the planet, you're leading it. And suddenly your wife comes in, yeah, no, I think it's my turn. That's an awkward conversation, for lack of a better term.
You're bringing out something, both of you are bringing out something. I just want to share a recent experience that I had. I went through a course. It's run by the Leadership Transition Institute. And in fact, I want to do the research on them. And this is an organization I feel could be a great partner for the Army ETS sponsorship program. But the name of the course that they run, it's their flagship course, is Changing Focus from We to Me. And the whole thought process is that many of us who are in uniform, and it doesn't matter what your rank was, doesn't matter what your position was, we're taught from a very early age as we're developed as young leaders, is you take care of the mission, you take care of your people. And so it's all about the team. It's all about helping develop a high-performing team to accomplish the mission. And certainly that's incredibly important. But as you start, once you identify that you're going to get out of the military, whether it's, and hopefully it's 24 months out or even further beyond, at some point you got to start changing your focus from being the leader or being a part of that team to what is in the best interest of me and my family, and putting the needs and requirements of you and your family first so that you can take care of them and have a successful low stress transition. It was a phenomenal course. And I think that's exactly, that's what we're talking about here is if you do that and you start early enough and you properly plan, prepare, and execute a good transition plan, you are going to, and you involve, and look, they talk about bringing your spouse into some of these courses that we were doing, but if you do that as a family team, that is where I think the folks will have a lot of success. I think that's really important.
You know, how you just sparked something. We always say transition plan and transition. It's really a life plan. It's really more than transition. I was thinking about this because we talked about day one. Can you teach us from day one? Teaching an 18-year-old kid to make a resume, that's not so much a veteran plan. That's a life plan. This is what colleges are supposed to do too. Again, that in another episode. But the point is, this is life planning. This is home planning, like from a societal level. And I think it can be done.
We have to do it because what we're doing right now is not working.
No, it's unacceptable, as Mike said.
Yeah, what we're doing right now is not working, and the numbers have to change.
Yeah, look, if I could, Howie, I'll just say I've, over the course of my career, lost more soldiers to suicide in the units that I have been in charge of than to combat. And I've deployed 6 times. So I'm not a combat tourist. I spent a good portion of my adult life downrange. But suicide is by far a bigger killer. I really think it's important, as I think about this problem, to frame across the lifespan of what we're talking about. The Army, the military services, when you're in uniform, have a suicide problem. When folks take off the uniform and rejoin civilian communities, there is a suicide problem. My position is this. I can, with pretty good fidelity, tell you that the loss of purpose, the loss of identity, the loss of structure, the convergent pressures of unemployment, homelessness, medical care, when you are becoming a civilian, are what generally are pushing people down this path. I can tell you that. Now, on the other hand, when we're in uniform, when you have structure, When you have someone whose entire job is to look after you every day and make sure you are developing, when you have mental health, free access to medical care whenever you want it, explain to me why the Army's suicide numbers are worse than society that has none of those things. So there are two sides of a coin. There's clearly something in uniform we are doing wrong that we need to fix. There is something we are doing in transition wrong that we are trying to fix. I don't necessarily think they're the same thing. And I do not buy that this is just a generation that views suicide as an option.
No,
I don't. Both sides of this coin we need to take a hard look in the mirror and figure out what can we do better.
So there is clearly a stigma while we're in uniform that somehow, some way, I don't know how it's going to happen, but at some point we have to figure out how to erase or lessen that stigma. I absolutely believe in my heart of hearts that the ETS sponsorship program will address that. It's a matter of continuing to prove it out, and that's going to happen. And I firmly believe that as we do that in the U.S. Army Special Operations Command, as we do that as 3 Corps does it, it's going to take on a momentum that I'm not sure we're prepared for, but that's a good thing. And which kind of gets back to your earlier comment of we need sponsors. And I would beat this drum almost daily when I talk to people, when I'm on LinkedIn, whatever. And I think I went through the training program. I thought it was phenomenal. It took basically a couple of hours of my time I did it virtually. I did it over 3 consecutive Tuesdays for about 2.5 hours, run by a retired sergeant major who did a phenomenal job. And it's facilitated with folks from Joe Gerassi's team at the Department of Veteran Affairs, that there are students pursuing their master's degree in clinical psychology. And some of it was, we did some read aheads, but a lot of it, to be very frank with you, it wasn't just death by PowerPoint. It was role play, giving us a certain amount of information and then allowing us and then putting us in these situations, and we would pair up in these small groups, and we would just role play back and forth depending on what the focus was for that particular topic that night. And it just helps you overcome some of the understand some of the challenges you might face as a sponsor and better prepare you for them. And I thought it was absolutely terrific. And I highly encourage, you do not have to be a veteran to be a sponsor. Anyone who passes the initial screening can elect to be a sponsor, and then they'll figure out a way to schedule for the training. But we have 200,000 folks every year that at some point, and as Mike said, the goal is 5 years, we want to have a pool of 200,000 sponsors to be able to address the needs of these transitioning service members. And we need folks to help us do that. We need communities to help us do that. And that's why I think this is a huge way to find a successful way to address this challenge. So, Lee, I'll turn it back over to you, but I just thought it was important to bring some of that out.
It was actually very well put. I'd love to see more high schools get involved in that, to be honest with you. I think there's a gap in the youth age groups of understanding what service really means. All right, let's turn it up to the book side of things here, because we got to get to that at some point. Mike, the book titles I do, as we briefed you before the show, I give every one of our guests a book title. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're serious. Yours, you said something early in the episode that kind of resonated with me, and there's actually like a business side to this. So this is almost a business book for the military. You said, and I don't want to make the joke, this was actually really impactful. You said you're a better soldier if you prepare to be a better veteran. That really stood out to me. Now, I'm an entrepreneur. Let me put my business hat on for a minute. Look, from a business sense in the military, recruitment, that's your lifeblood. If that stops, first off, we have way bigger problems than people probably realize if there's no military, which is not going to happen. But the lifeblood of the military is recruitment and getting new people in. You painted a pretty shiny example today of looking at service in a completely different way. Of imagine looking at a veteran and saying, wow, that man or woman really did all this amazing stuff. And now he's or she's a productive member of their community, and their community surrounds that person. I bet you that would bring recruitment numbers up. And I bet you that would help out the military quite a bit. It's almost too obvious, right? I think that's your book title, though. You'll be a better soldier if you're prepared to be a better veteran. I think that's impactful on multiple levels. And I think that speaks on multiple levels, because being a veteran is not just about finding a job after you're done. It's about purpose, team, identity, family, all of these things. And you're doing that work, man. And I'm really inspired by the conversation we've had so far today. Still have one more question left.
Let me say.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go to a movie. I'm going to go to movies now rather than sports.
Oh, it's my realm too. Be careful.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that this country views military service and the people that it produces through one of two lenses. It's either born on the 4th of July,
right,
or it's 300. And you're either one or the other. And popular culture goes there, fundraising goes there, music videos go there. I would offer that where we should be is in the movie 300, but it's in the clip where they're talking about the Athenians. And they're laughing at them for being potters and poets and sculptors and farmers. But you know what? Those folks stood up to defend their country, and they did what was asked of them. And they didn't do it. They didn't require being raised from childhood to hunt wolves. And then they went back. And you don't hear about Sparta too much after that period of history, but you hear about Athens and everything that came out of that. We just got to recalibrate a little bit, right? Because these are fellow citizens. They've chosen a path. They do it to the best of their ability, and then they come home. And that's how we got to think about it.
That's a really great point.
That is awesome, actually.
That's a great point. And on the joking side, you guys know the Navy is about to get a lot of new recruits because the new Top Gun movie is doing so well. But it's a really good film, by the way. But no, I agree with you 100%. That's actually a great point. They do make fun of the Athenians in that film, but they go on to lead society after that. Amazing. Listen, Mike, last question. Our organization, Couple Moments Media, is all about mental fitness, mental health. We ask every guest this question. We all deal with mental fitness, mental health at times of our lives. Doesn't matter who you are, on varying levels. We'd love to know how you practice your mental fitness, what you do on a daily basis. If there's anything you had to deal with that you're comfortable talking about that they got you through. You did mention like your transition's fairly recent, but how do you maintain your mental health, mental fitness on a daily basis?
Yeah, no, fair enough. Probably not as well as I should. I'll probably start with that. For me, it was, there's a couple components to it. One, I had to recognize pretty early on that I didn't have the answers that I needed to have for a lot of things. This was just new stuff for me. And it was so different from what I was used to for my entire adult life that there was a mental switch that I had to just, look, partner, you don't know what you're doing. Just accept that and then make the best of it. Because there's no staff that's hovering around me anymore, feeding me answers. So mentally acknowledging where I was and what I knew and what I didn't know mattered. Physical fitness for me is super important. I make time every single day to work out, not for the sake of working out, but that's a moment in time where I can block everything out, be completely focused on something and feel like I'm achieving something. I would laugh. I'm actually coming to you from my bar here, but I won't go there. I won't flip the camera around and show you what's in the background.
Yeah, like lots of orange juice, cranberry juice.
Yeah, a lot of half V8. I try to stay connected with my faith. I try to work out every day. I try to carve out some amount of time where I can just not have to feel like I have to make every decision in the world. And I try to do a better job of being. I'm the product of, much like Howie alluded to, I'm the product of a culture where you don't admit that you are flawed in any way. And I try to carve out time now where I just sit down with the wife and the kids and say, look, this is what we're doing. And I don't have the answer. I'm just telling you up front. And so I want to know what you think. And that seems to be better, right? It takes, for me at least, it takes some of the pressure off of feeling like you got to solve everything. I don't meditate. I don't do yoga. I don't go on long runs in the woods anymore. The knees aren't quite up for that. But I do what I can to try and keep things in balance. And I recognize that there are points in time where I just got to ask for help. I got to ask someone that's done this before because I don't know. And it's better to ask for help before you need it than need it and not ask.
Wow. Yeah. And look, I think bravery takes many forms. Courage takes many forms. Being vulnerable is very courageous in the right settings. And I think that we're learning that. You said earlier about how with the younger generation in the military, how a lot of people say that they look at suicide as an option. And I think younger people are actually more emotionally connected than they've ever been. And that's misunderstood a lot of times. And we're having to evolve as really a species, not just society, to move towards that. And it happens slow. But like I said, I love that you said keep things in balance. If there's any message we've learned from this question, again, we learn a lot of lessons on this show. No one's got it. No one's got it down. And if you're having a really great mental time, it's not going to stay that way. There's no answer. There's no snap your fingers and you're mentally fit. It is a daily thing. I said, we say mental fitness, Mike, we say mental fitness because people understand physical fitness. If you stop going to the gym and eat like shit, you know the outcome of that lifestyle. If you stop working on your mind and you have uncontrolled thoughts that and you're not getting help for that, we know where that goes. But there's a stigma on one of those two things for some reason. And like I said, the fact you just said, I'll say it, you are having to learn how to make yourself vulnerable as a former general. That's bravery to me. That's courageous to me. You know what I mean? I know people can't do that, never served. So I think you're leading from the front like you always have. Howie, you do this as well. This is another reason why I look to the military. Whenever I need answers, I look to the military or my wife. She usually has an answer. Might not be the right one, but I always ask her anyway. It's the right thing. Anyway, Howie, unless you have anything, Mike, this was fantastic. I'm so thankful for every single one of these episodes. I learned something every time. And again, you dropped some diamonds today on how we look at military culture, veteran culture. I actually think the ETS sponsorship program is probably complicated to implement. It's not that hard to grasp. It's really not. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think 200,000 people as sponsors is that far-fetched. I think that's actually incredibly achievable. And that belief now that like you've presented that of we can do this, I hope that inspires our listeners and other people around the country. Because I say this all the time, we have got to do a better job of serving those that serve us. All right. It will heal many problems with this country if we start to look at service a little bit differently. And I want to thank you for everything you do and are doing.
You reminded me, Lee, some of the things you said, Trevor Moad, may he rest in peace. You don't have to be broken to get fixed, right? You don't have to wait till it's a problem to do something about it. And this concept of mental fitness is exactly that. It's being proactive, not reactive. Mike, I just want to thank you for taking the time with us today. This program, I know how important it is to you. It is very important to me. I know that I just understand the very tip of this iceberg. There's so much more underneath the water that I'm learning about every day. The more time I spend with you, the more time I spend with Bill Buck, the more time I get to listen to and talk with Joe Girassi. And this is really important to me. I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time because I just want to continue to help get the word out about the importance of this program, educate people about it, encourage transitioning service members to enroll in the program, hopefully elect to have a sponsor. I want to do everything I can do to make this program one that will help them and their families have a very soft landing on their next drop zone. And I just believe so much with all of my heart and all of my soul that what this is doing will, because my personal vision, my personal purpose, and I redefine that again over the course I just did over the last weekend is to be laser focused on lowering the high rate of veteran suicide, homelessness, and problematic transitions. And that's why I'm so invested in the ETS sponsorship program. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. And I will do everything within my power to continue to contribute in any way I can to make this successful. But thanks for being with us today.
No, Howie, Lee, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Any chance I can get to put the word out and highlight not only the program, but the intent of the program. I'm really grateful for it. I don't want anyone that's listening today to think that we talked a lot about suicide, we talked a lot about problems, but really this program is about opportunities.
Right.
It's not a heavy lift. When I talk to large groups, I tell them all the time as I'm looking for sponsors and things, sure, some people need a lot of help. Most people just need a little help. And with a little help, they can be wildly successful and you can change a life one veteran at a time. So really thankful for what you're doing, Howie, personally, for what you guys are doing as a program, for giving me this chance, and look forward to working with you again down the road.
Cool. Yeah, it goes both ways, man. It is a privilege, sir, to have you on. I said sir, that was the first time. I apologize, but yes.
It's all good.
So you've been
only one today.
And I'll let you have it right now. You've been listening to Life After the Military, again, powered by Pivotal Moments Media. As we say this, we always receive value. We hope you're receiving value from our podcast. And if you did, make sure to subscribe, rate us on Apple Podcasts, share it with others. Let's get the word out. Let's talk about this great program here that Mike's doing. You can learn more about our program, Pivotal Moments Media, pivotalmomentsmedia.com. And check out all the channels that we have. We have a sports channel. We have a channel that inspires women, building mental fitness in the workplace, how artists of all types can overcome adversity and strengthen their mental fitness. We really are on that mission together. And also check out our Mental Fitness Education Center for more content just like this. But for General Mike Eastman, the Sir, and Howie Cohen, another Sir, I'm Lee Elias. Thank you so much for joining us. Keep an eye out for more episodes soon, wherever podcasts can be heard. And we'll see you next time on Life After the Military. Have a great evening, everybody.